Hello and welcome to the Herbal Hormonal Wellness webinar series. We are so glad you are joining us again, and we created this so you can learn about ways to support your hormonal health and feel your best. My name is Abby Rodriguez. I'm a certified herbalist and holistic nutritionist. I work with clients to empower them to use plants to heal and nourish their bodies. I also have a website called The Better Half where I share gluten-free recipes and wellness tips and resources for the family. And we have Dr. Claudia Welch joining us today. But before we introduce her, I'm going to have Jennifer, our co-host, introduce herself.
Hi everyone, I'm Jennifer Cardilla. I'm a yoga teacher, a writer, and a student of Ayurveda in Brooklyn. And I've received over 600 hours of yoga teacher training, and I'm enrolled in the Kripalu School of Ayurveda's health coaching program. And this spring I completed an herbal crafter apprenticeship at my local apothecary, Brooklyn Arboreum, which is rooted in the wise woman tradition. And I teach and write about all facets of wellness, from vegan cooking to Ayurvedic rituals and holistic ways to manage stress and injuries and creativity.
Thank you, Jennifer. So we are extremely excited to introduce you to Dr. Claudia Welch. She is going to be talking about the topic of reproductive hormonal health and a little bit about her. She is a doctor of oriental medicine, an Ayurvedic practitioner and educator, and the author of several books, including Balance Your Hormones, Balance Your Life. Jennifer has them here. And The Four Qualities of Effective Physicians. She lectures internationally on oriental and Ayurvedic medicine, exploring how ideas in Eastern medicine apply to women's health and today's reality in general. She has served on the teaching faculty of the Ayurvedic Institute, Kripalu School of Ayurveda, Southwest Acupuncture College, and the AcuPractice seminars. You can visit her at drclaudiawelch.com for more information about her courses, books, and other resources. So welcome, Dr. Welch.
Thank you so much. And can you hear me okay? Everything's all right with that? All right, good. Well, thank you both, and thanks everybody for who's tuning in. Nice to be with you.
Thank you so much. And so let's start right going in with your experience. You obviously have a great deal of knowledge in both the traditional Chinese medicine school and Ayurveda, both kind of Eastern lineages. And so explain to us a little bit how the Eastern practices that you practice view hormones compared to perhaps a Western perspective.
It's a good question. And it's interesting. This whole conversation about hormones is a relatively new conversation. The first hormone-like substance wasn't discovered until 1902. So even in Western medicine, it's a new conversation. And I suppose it's not exactly accurate to say even in Western medicine, which is a bit younger than Ayurveda and Chinese medicine. But they don't talk about hormones in Ayurveda and Chinese medicine. That's one of the things that we've had to synthesize in the last century or less, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, because there's no language for hormones in Ayurveda and Chinese medicine. But what there are lenses through which to view different aspects of reality, including hormones. So, for example, I studied Ayurveda for a long time and studied Chinese medicine. And then when I had my practice, I had all these women coming in talking about their hormones. And pretty much the conversation goes like something like this. I'm having hormonal changes. My hormones are whacked out. Something like that. Something really super technical like that. And everybody was talking like that. And what I like to do is translate these ideas that, or experiences that my patients are having into Eastern language so that I can see that aspect of reality with a lens that kind of sorts it into categories and sense for me. And I couldn't do that. So even after having a background in Chinese medicine and Ayurveda, I couldn't do it because the background that I had, what I was taught, didn't feel sufficient to me for me to really understand it myself. So to understand how to coach other people, forget about it. I understand myself what hormones do, why they do what they do, and I didn't see them in an elegant pattern. And that's one of the things I love about Eastern medicine traditions, is that they sort things into patterns and frameworks and lenses through which we can understand and view different aspects of reality. And that's really all it is they give these lenses, these models of reality. They're not reality. They're ways of describing reality. But sometimes they're extraordinarily elegant, and sometimes they're one lens through which to view reality is not so elegant, and it's better to pick another lens. So for example, both Chinese medicine and Ayurvedic medicine talk about 5 elements. And you'd think, oh, 5 elements, both holistic systems, those must be translatable to each other. They're not. And if you try to make them, it doesn't fit. It's like a square peg into a round hole, which never, that phrase, don't try to fit a round peg into a square hole or vice versa, never really made sense to me, because if the hole is big enough, then you could fit any shape into it. But it doesn't translate, is my point. And so you can use, for example, the 5-element system of Ayurveda, and that is very elegant for understanding certain aspects of reality. You can use the 5-element aspect of Chinese medicine. That's really elegant for understanding other things. In Chinese medicine, we have the 8 principles. In Ayurveda, we have the 3 doshas. They each offer different lenses. One of the interesting things is that the only model of reality that the 2 share that is exactly translatable that I've found, besides the term for chi and prana, which is really pretty interchangeable, is the idea of duality, of sorting reality into duality, of describing reality in terms of duality, of relativity, relative hot, relative cold. There's no absolutes, but there's these polar opposites in which we find some kind of balance, and in between which we find some kind of balance, like hot, cold. 98.6 Fahrenheit is our balance between hot and cold. We're really prima donnas, right? We get a couple degrees on one side or the other of that, and we're really uncomfortable. A few more degrees and we're dead. So this isn't optional for us. This is essential for us to find some kind of balance between duality. And this idea of describing reality through duality is so fundamental, I think, and so archetypal a way to view reality, that both systems came up with exactly the same idea of how to describe duality. And so that I have found to be extraordinarily useful and helpful and practical when we're trying to understand hormones. So when you're talking about how do we talk about hormones, these ancient systems don't talk about hormones, but what they do give us is this lens through which to view this aspect of reality being hormonal health and what hormones do. And so the aspect of duality is very useful, more useful than any other sorting tool I've found for understanding hormonal health.
So in that sense, would you say that hormones are kind of on or off? Like, is that the lens through which you're describing that there's a kind of, there's a black and white and perhaps the kind of middle ground where that's the perfect balance for us? Or how does that lens then speak to how we understand how you described a patient perhaps who said, like, my hormones are out of whack?
Right.
How would you then explain it in that sense?
Good question. So what we wouldn't do is we wouldn't say something is totally black or totally white. We'd find the scale on which it registers in terms of relativity. So the second you have 2 dissimilar substances, which is to say, the second you have 2 substances that are not exactly the same, you have one that is going to be more yin or more yang. So let's talk about that for a second. In Chinese medicine, the polar opposites are called yin and yang. In Ayurveda, they're called brahmana and langana, respectively, or santarpana and apatarpana. So and basically what these 2 polar opposites are is the yin or the brahmana aspect is building, nourishing, grounding, calming, lubricating, and archetypically the more feminine of the 2 polar groups. And the other group is more archetypically masculine, which is not to say that men are yang and women are yin, but men have more inherently yang qualities and women have more inherently yin qualities, but everybody has both. And the yang camp, the Lungana camp, is stimulating, motivating, lightening, and fundamentally active versus fundamentally substance, right? So when we're looking at hormones, none of them are absolutely yin or absolutely yang. None of them are absolutely hot, absolutely cold. All of them are ambassadors of opposites. So all hormones are navigating balance within extremes in the body. But what you will have that I've found is either a hormone or a group of hormones that are more predominantly one group, one side of the polar opposite or the other. So for example, for women, sex hormones, predominantly estrogen and progesterone, are fundamentally more brahmana, fundamentally more yin, fundamentally more building, grounding, nourishing, and lubricating. And stress hormones are fundamentally more yang, more lungana, more lightening. Lungana means lightening, right, as opposed to brahmana, which literally means building. So the stress hormones stimulate us to get out of the way of danger. They motivate us to fight or flight. They have a very lightening overall experience for the body, because when we engage in behaviors or consume foods or experiences that are fundamentally stimulating and motivating, we build those aspects in ourselves, and the stress hormones rise. Make sense?
Yes, thank you. And I think that's a really nice segue into our next question about what is in your understanding, how do the different hormonal systems, in particular the sex hormones, the reproductive system, how are they in conversation with the other hormonal systems, like the fight or flight response and the adrenals and the thyroid and all of these things? How does that fit into this overall balancing picture that you've painted so beautifully?
All right. So if we were to have, let's say, to be really technical, a bucket, if we come into the world with each one of us with a bucket of yin hormones and a bucket of yang hormones, a bucket of brahmana and lungana hormones, and so for aiming this towards women's health and women's physiology, a bucket of nourishing sex hormones and a bucket of nourishing stress hormones, what you want is those levels in those buckets to be equal. If those levels are equal, we've got the right balance of yin and yang, the right balance of building and lightening, the right balance of hot versus cold, the right balance of dry versus oily, the right balance of heavy versus light, the right balance between opposites. And again, hot, cold, 98.6. We're looking for that sweet spot always between hunger and satisfaction, thirst and quenching, between these opposite experiences. So the hormones are going to be ambassadors between those. And so what we always want is we want relative equality. If one system has a lower, say, for example, as we age, right? As we age, sex hormones for women naturally, physiologically, as opposed to pathologically, which is to say naturally, healthily, normally reduce. It's not a pathological condition that our sex hormones start to decrease as we age. So from 35 to 50, our levels of progesterone decrease little by little. At 50 or around menopause, whether it's surgical or natural, at around 50, both estrogen and progesterone levels drop dramatically. So if we visualize these two buckets and we see that this bucket of sex hormones is decreasing and decreasing and decreasing, what should naturally happen to the stress levels? What should happen in order to maintain a good balance? they need to be decreasing as well, right?
Yeah.
And so what do we see, like, Abby and Jennifer and whoever's listening, right? What do we see? Do we see women in there who are 35 to 50? Do we see their levels of stress decreasing from 35 to 50?
No.
We do not. And it's sort of an open secret. Anybody who's been working with women can see we're in tough shape. We're not doing well. I mean, we're great, but we're not doing well, because we're getting irregular cycles, we're getting painful cycles, we're struggling with fertility, we're struggling with perimenopausal issues, going through menopause early, we're struggling with breast tenderness and breast health and hot flashes and mood swings and panic attacks and insomnia and all these things that build, and then we go through menopause and there's just the night sweats and then bone loss and women's type heart disease. We're in trouble. And when we look at why that is and what can we do with those bucket levels to return to a state of balance, we see either that we need more sex hormones or we need less stress hormones, right? And if it's physiologically natural to have the sex hormones reduce, we're really hardwired to have less and less stress from 35 to 50, and then significantly less. And this question of then arises that, well, why are we so stressed out? What are we doing? And you could say, well, we're stressed out because we're eating vata aggravating food, or we're stressed out because we're staying up too late, or we're stressed out because we're getting up too early, or we're stressed out because we don't have enough time, or we're stressed out because we're working in a job that we don't want to be working at really in our heart of hearts, or we're stressed out because we have kids and a job and a hobby and we're trying to fit in yoga and we're trying to fit in meditation. So we could say we're stressed out because of all those things, but why are we doing all those things? And so we want to go to the cause of the cause of the cause here to see why are we depleting our stress hormones consistently over and over and over. And by depleting them, I mean calling on them so much that they're always high, right? They're always high and never allowing this natural balance to happen. And so that becomes a really interesting question. And to me, it ends up landing somewhere in the neighborhood of hormonal health has to do with integrity.
That's a big idea to sit with.
Yeah, it is. And, it is a big idea. And, we're living our lives kind of with that big idea in the background. And what I mean by that is we may not have put those words to it like, oh, my hormones are out of whack because this is an integrity issue. But when we sit down, I'm going to back up for a second and say, the book that I wrote that came out in 2010 or 11, Balance Your Hormones, Balance Your Life, the title is really backwards. I had a wonderful editor, and she let me write the whole inside of the book, and she wrote the title, and she said, I got to get this great title, Balance Your Hormones, Balance Your Life. And I said, that's great, but it's backwards, because that sort of insinuates that if you balance your hormones, your lives will balance. Balance your hormones, balance your life, right? That's what that insinuates. Whereas really the whole book and the whole idea is exactly opposite. If we balance our lives, our hormones will balance. Hormones don't go out of whack in a vacuum. They go out of whack in response to our emotions, our thoughts, our experiences, our relationships, and so forth. So if we balance our lives, our hormones will balance. There's just not a quick fix for that. There might be something that we need to take in the short term to manage some symptoms that are really up and really powerful and in the short term as we figure out how to balance our lives. But what does balancing our lives mean? To me, it's this question of integrity. Like, we're working so much so that we get a little bit bigger house or pay a mortgage on a place that we can't afford, or climb a ladder that we didn't really want to be climbing in the first place, because really what do we want? We want to go out to tea with girlfriends, but now that seems like luxurious and we don't have time for that, and we really want to lie on the couch because we're having panic attacks and not sleeping, but that seems absolutely positively embarrassing to do that, right? So we don't rest. And it's very, it's curious because we have this a fairly healthy relationship with food. Many of us who have been studying our health, we feel hungry. We try to satisfy that with some wholesome food. We feel thirsty. We try to satisfy that with some wholesome drink. We feel tired and we go, oh, what's wrong? Or I'm so embarrassed that I'm tired, or, do I have some terrible disease, or somebody's going to see that I'm tired and I'm not keeping up with the pace that we're supposed to keep up with. And who's making this? Who's saying we're supposed to keep up with this? Who's judging us? Who's watching us? Is it our partners? Is it society? Is it men? Is it other women? In my experience, all those things, yes, there's some level of momentum that has been created in society and in women and in men and in partners and in all these external factors. There's a momentum that has been created that is very young, that is very lungana. It's very stimulated and motivated, and we value and we revere almost sharpness and intellect and ambition. But the biggest factor is me. The biggest factor is ourselves. That's what I've found. For me, when I became really convinced of this, that women really need to rest more and slow down from 35 to 50, I myself gave away my very busy private practice the month I turned 35 in exchange for being able to go practice there part-time. This teaching and writing was picking up. And so for the first time in my life, I had some time to lay on the couch, some time to watch Seinfeld reruns, which I'd never watched the first time around because I was too busy. And I would feel embarrassed if somebody would walk in. I'd hear footfalls from my husband getting back from somewhere, and I'd want to pick up a magazine and look like I'm doing something important. I'm not just resting, I'm really doing something important here. Right. So, and then, but what I realized was even more pathological was when nobody was there. My husband wasn't due back, and he's very supportive, by the way. He's never judged me for resting. Who judges me is me. So I just realized I had hidden cameras everywhere, just watching how productive I was and how on task and on target I was. And that made me realize, okay, that's pathological. I need to quiet down because I was tired. I'd worked really hard night and day, literally my whole adult life. And I needed this restitution so that I could, like a phoenix from the flames, this inner true level of interest in activity could rise from the ashes of restitution. I would rest long enough until I would say, okay, what's the real action I wouldn't even question it. The motivation for the real next action would just spontaneously arise. And I was on board. I was totally on board. Yeah, let's do this. Me, I'm talking to myself, right? Let's do this. And it was activity born from restitution, activity born from rejuvenation, activity born from restoration. It wasn't activity born from caffeine. It wasn't activity born from a stress level that I mistook as energy. It wasn't activity born from ambition. It wasn't activity born from a goal that I had sort of arbitrarily set for myself. It was a true desire for the next action. And that was coming from this innermost essence. Okay, now it's time to do this. And then I'm on board. Then I'm on board with that activity. So I've really gone on a tangent here. I can't remember where we started.
No, not a tangent at all. Everything that you just said resonated so much with me personally, at least, and I'm sure Abby as well. What you said about mistaking stress and anxiety for energy was
Stuck
kind
out
of
to me too. I
a
wanted to
big
hear
light
more.
bulb. Yeah. So how can we tell the difference between stress and energy if they're both yang, you know?
Well, I hate to make you do the work here, but how do you tell the difference?
I would say that energy has a kind of a joyful quality to it. There's an inherent desire and almost a lack of concern about how it turns out in the end. Like, I'm just excited about the process more than the outcome, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. How about you, Abby? Do you see the...
I feel like I echo that same sentiment that Jennifer said, because I find myself getting in flow, is how I like to call it. When I'm in flow and it feels that there's a magnetism, there's an energy to my energy, right? I think when it comes from a place of stress, I physically feel that in my body, you know, when I have a long to-do list and I'm amped up and I'm ready to go for the day and I get all my to-do lists done. But at the end of the day, I feel depleted and my body feels tense. It doesn't come from a joyful place.
I really love that. And I really love the tuning into the body, because I think we're really used to tuning into the brain and not respecting too much what's going on below the neck. Mm-hmm. And, you know, this is a quality of pitta in Ayurveda. It's a quality of ambition. It's a quality of type A, kind of either type A people or type A cultures, you know, where even if you're not a type A person, it's very easy to get drawn into that momentum. And what that does, you know, is it divorces us from listening to pretty important signals from the body. So, for example, I could set a goal. I have my to-do list for the day. I don't really feel like I get up and I don't have that energy for that day. And how I know that, I, you know, kind of tune into my body, and I feel like if I'm pushing myself, my body starts to buzz, almost like I have caffeine in my system. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, it'll start to buzz and it'll start to feel wrong. I'll feel tired, or I'll feel like some kind of digestive something, like either, you know, maybe there's constipation or a little loose stools or just a sense of weight or something. And I push through that. And I'm saying but I mean any of us, right? Mm-hmm. So then I say, well, okay, shut up. That doesn't matter. The to-do list matters. I'm going to do that. And I keep doing that. And after a while, the digestive disturbances get worse, and I go get Flagyl, or I get Metamucil, or I get some, you know, or I get Pepsid AC, or I get some kind of digestive help from the digestive aisle, and I drink some caffeine, and or I smoke a cigarette, or I need to feel grounded because I have that buzzy feeling, so I grab some kind of heavy processed food on my way out the door, and I kind of ground that a little bit. And I'm ignoring, you know, what the real need is there, which I woke up that morning, and the real need was not to take the walk and not to even really engage in a strenuous dinacharya. So, you know, somebody will set this really healthy daily routine for themselves and not listen then to the body saying, not today, everybody. Today I have my period, or today I need to just rest, or today, for whatever reason, I feel low energy today, and going with that and being in integrity with that moment and what I mean by being in integrity is listening to that innermost essence. It includes the body, but it's this innermost essence which is aware of the body, right? So that innermost essence says, not today. That's the to-do list. I get it, but not today. That stuff, XYZ on that to-do list, is not matching where I am today. So that's going to wait. ABC I can do. That feels like something I can do today, but XYZ, that's not going to happen today. And what I've found with this is, okay, then my body relaxes. It knows it's not going to be forced to do something that it's not up for. And and then I'm really on board. And so it doesn't take as much energy from me. It doesn't, I'm not fighting with it. And I'm also not learning to hate my life. You know, I'm not getting through the to-do list every day that I don't want to do. My body's not on board with it. My spirit is not on board with it when I'm honest about it, and I'm doing it anyway. That becomes a life I hate. And that's a tough, you know, those are strong words, a life I hate. But if we back off from that and say a life that I feel trapped in, or a life that I feel stressed to be in, or that I, like Abby said, don't feel joy, right? I don't feel the joy of that to-do list. I don't feel the joy associated with the actions I'm taking and the energy that I'm expending. It's a push. It's not a cooperation.
Mm-hmm.
And things start to break down. I mean, there's so many things. There's nothing that doesn't start to break down with that. The spirit, the body, the mind, the emotions, the sleep, everything starts to break down around that. And there's no herb that can fix that, you know? That takes courage. And that's just so bizarre, right? Because what we're saying is that it doesn't take courage to do the to-do list. That takes an overblown sense of responsibility. It takes courage to live the life we really want to be living. It takes courage to listen to that innermost voice and act on that innermost voice. That takes courage. It takes courage to do what we want to do the very most. You know, if we look at that to-do list and we say, no, I'm not. I'm going out to tea with Abby and Jennifer today. That's what I'm doing. You know, that takes courage. And what I find for me is that there'll be this little fear, like, okay, well, I'm not going to get through that to-do list, but I have to, and I know I have to do it. I've got these steps. If I just do what is in resonance with that inner voice and with my body at that day, that moment, that time, there inevitably comes around this other kind of energy. Like, I can't do my taxes today. Okay, well, don't do them, because a few days from now, I'll get this, like, oh, I can't do anything else. I might as well do my taxes. You know, there's this natural energy and interest in doing different things at different times, and kind of cooperating with that and finding and listening for that.
Mm-hmm. It's a really important message. And one of the things in my own path with this work that I actually found the most kind of healing when I was in that state of depletion and kind of breakdown was the simplest part of, well, maybe not simple, but, or maybe it's not easy per se, but simple, relatively speaking, the dinacharya, which you spoke of, the daily routine. And so by way of closing, perhaps in the last few minutes, you can describe a little bit what that might look like according to your practices and your experience, and how we could perhaps use that if we are feeling kind of depleted or imbalanced, and what specific things we might incorporate into our daily lives, or how we can use that as a more of a maintenance and a preventative measure almost against getting to that state of depletion.
Yeah, great. Well, dinacharya is just, I think, the cornerstone of health. I just think it's just incredible, and it's free, and it's much more effective than herbs and remedies and drugs for many, many things. If that's the baseline of our lives, this healthy daily routine, it just takes care of so much. And you don't have to worry about weeding this and weeding that and weeding this, because you're creating a terrain that's not hospitable to weeds. It's hospitable to flowers and vegetables and health. I would say that it's really worth some effort and time to look at what a daily routine is. That, you know, I have a mini ebook on my website about dinacharya specifically, and what Ayurveda recommends for it, and to kind of look at that for each of us and see, okay, what fits and what can I do now? And one thing I want to add to that, because that could be a very long conversation, is actually the power of medicine of subtraction. So in a daily routine, often what we do is we look at this prescribed daily routine in Ayurveda, and we get a little overwhelmed, and that becomes its own to-do list. And we don't have room and space to create a daily routine. And if in that, I think the medicine of subtraction is the very first thing to do in a daily routine, is get rid of one thing that we don't like doing. Get rid of 2 things that we don't like doing. Get rid of 3 do it one at a time. And as we get rid of the things we don't like doing or that aren't good for us, pushing a little too hard, get rid of that. And then the caffeine can kind of sort of fall away because we don't need it quite as much. Get rid of driving the kid to soccer every day of the week. Figure out, get rid of something that we hate. And that is scary because we think our whole lives are going to fall apart. But my experience is that they don't. The things that fall apart are the things we want to fall apart. And then we gain a little courage that our lives, actually the quality of our lives can improve. And then we have a little space, and then it's really useful to spend a little time contemplating what a healthy daily routine is for us. Maybe it might be very nice to get up pre-dawn, but maybe we're just too exhausted for a year before we can get to that. Maybe sleeping in is the first thing we've got to do in our daily routine. Maybe getting up early before the sunrise awakens something in us, and that's what we need to do. What each of us needs to do for that daily routine as we start entering that world and that idea and that reality may be a little different for all of us at first. But whether it's whatever time we get up, brushing our teeth and scraping our tongues and going to the bathroom and doing some oil massage, taking care of our sense organs is a big part of daily routine. So even if we don't do much with it, if we even just contemplate our senses for a second, our eyes, our nose, our ears, our mouth, our skin, if we do a little something for each of these organs of senses, they relate very much to our mind, to the channel system of the mind in Ayurveda. So cleansing those organs of senses, very briefly, throw a little water on the eyes, clean out the ears a little bit, brush his teeth, put a little oil on the skin, something, or if we can't do the whole Abhyanga or something, just a little natural essential oil that we smell that's on our skin, something simple. So I guess the thing is I love Dinacharya. And again, there's a little ebook on my website, and you can read all about it. Anybody who's interested. There's a lot of elements of Dinacharya that are so beautiful to incorporate. But if it becomes a to-do list and overwhelming, to think about that medicine of subtraction first, and think about maybe adopting some very simple things we can do for our organs of senses when we first wake up to the world every day.
That's such a beautiful picture of health. It feels so easeful and free are the words that come to mind. So as ambitious and courageous as it is to embrace that, I hope that everyone who's watching and listening can take up that charge together so that we can all feel this way in a container of flowers, as you described. I loved it. Thank you so much, Dr. Welch. And for everyone who's watching, we'll be able to email you with, in the email that you received with this video, there's all the information to connect with Dr. Welch and her resources, her books, the post that she mentioned about Dinacharya and all of her other teachings. And you could also always reach out to me and Abby via Facebook or Instagram if you have any specific questions about this or anything else that's part of our series.
Thank you.
Super. Thank you so much for having me. It's so nice to be with all of you.
Yes, thank you, everybody.